Rancher lived alone since his wife died, until a caravan of beautiful widows want to stay for an LA. The ranch stood alone on a wide stretch of land where the wind moved freely across open fields. Long wooden fences ran along the edges of pastures, and the mountains far away looked pale under the morning sun. For many years, the rancher had lived there without company. The house was strong but quiet, filled with memories that he rarely spoke about. After his wife passed away, he stopped visiting town unless it was necessary. He worked hard, spoke little, and kept his life simple. Every morning began the same way. Before sunrise, he stepped outside with a cup of coffee, watching the sky slowly change color. Horses moved slowly near the barn, and birds crossed the sky in long lines. The rancher preferred silence. It gave him control over thoughts he did not want to face. He believed that routine was safer than change. Inside the house, signs of the past remained. A small photo rested on the shelf above the fireplace. He never moved it. Bass. Sometimes he paused in front of it, but he never stayed long. The kitchen table had 2 chairs, though he only used one. The second chair remained untouched, like a quiet reminder of another life. People in the nearby town knew him well enough, but did not know his heart. They called him reliable and honest, but also distant. Some said he was still carrying grief that time and not softened. Others believed he simply preferred solitude. Either way, he rarely joined gatherings or stayed for long conversations. One evening, clouds gathered over the land as the wind picked up. The rancher had just finished repairing a broken gate when he noticed movement near the far road. At first, he thought it was travelers passing through, which happened from time to time. But as he watched, he realized it was a caravan. Several wagons moving slowly, pulled by tired horses. The group approached carefully, stopping at a respectful distance from his land. He walked toward them, cautious but calm. When he reached the lead wagon, he saw several women, their faces marked by long journeys and strong determination. They introduced themselves politely, explaining that they were widows traveling together, searching for a place where they could rest and decide their next step. Their wagon wheel had been damaged, and night was coming quickly. They asked only for permission to stay near the barn until morning. The rancher hesitated. For years, he had protected his quiet life. Allowing strangers onto his land felt like opening a door he had intentionally kept closed. Yet something about their honesty made him pause. They did not appear helpless. Instead, they carried themselves with dignity, showing strength despite exhaustion. He remembered how his wife once welcomed travelers without hesitation. That memory softened his resistance. After a long silence, he nodded and gave them permission to stay for one night. He pointed toward a safe area near the barn where they could rest. The women thanked him with genuine relief, quickly organizing their camp with quiet efficiency. As the sun set, the ranch felt different. Voices filled the air, soft conversations mixing with the sound of cooking and laughter. The rancher watched from a distance, unsure how to react. He had forgotten what it felt like to hear life moving around him. One of the women approached with a small plate of food as a gesture of thanks. He tried to refuse politely, but she insisted, saying kindness should be returned with kindness. He accepted, feeling slightly uncomfortable, but also strangely grateful. Later that evening, he sat on the porch while the firelight from their camp flickered across the land. The widows shared stories quietly among themselves. Though he could not hear every word, he sensed shared strength between them. They were not defined by loss alone. They were moving forward despite it. The rancher felt memories rising inside him. Evenings long ago when he and his wife sat outside watching the stars. For years, he had avoided such thoughts. Now, surrounded by unfamiliar voices, he realized that silence had not truly healed him. It had only hidden parts of himself. As night deepened, he checked the animals and ensured the guests were safe. The women thanked him again, promising they would leave at sunrise. He nodded, unsure whether he felt relief or disappointment. Inside the house, he noticed how quiet it seemed compared to outside. The laughter carried through the open window, reminding him that life continued beyond grief. He lay awake longer than usual, listening to sounds he had not heard in years. Morning arrived with golden light across the fields. The widows were already awake, helping repair the damaged wagon wheel. Some had begun cleaning the area where they camped, showing respect for his land. He watched from the porch, surprised by their willingness to work rather than simply rest. One woman greeted him with a warm smile and asked if they could stay longer until their repairs were complete. He hesitated again. The decision felt heavier now because he sensed that their presence was already changing him. After a moment of thought, he agreed, telling himself it was only temporary. Yet deep inside, he knew something else had begun, a shift he could not fully understand.
As the day continued, the ranch no longer felt empty.
Movement filled every corner. Conversations replaced silence, and even the animals seemed more alert. The rancher moved through his tasks, aware that the quiet life he had carefully built was beginning to change. For the first time since his wife's passing, he felt a small sense of anticipation about what tomorrow might bring. The ranch no longer felt silent after the widows stayed longer than expected. Despitude.
Morning began with more movement than the rancher had seen in years. Smoke rose gently from a cooking fire near the barn, and soft voices filled the air as the women prepared breakfast together.
He stood on the porch with his coffee, watching from a distance, unsure how to feel about the sudden change. For a long time, he believed quiet was the only way to live after loss. Now, the sound of people working and talking around him felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. One of the widows waved politely when she noticed him watching. He gave a small nod in return before heading toward the barn to begin his daily chores. To his surprise, several of the women were already helping. One repaired a loose fence post while another carefully brushed. One of the horses. They moved with purpose, showing they were used to hard work. He had expected guests who would simply rest and leave, but these women behaved like people who wanted to contribute. He tried to tell them they did not need to work, but they insisted. They explained that working gave them strength and helped them move forward from their past. Their words stayed with him as he continued his tasks. During the day, he learned small details about them. Each woman carried a different story. Some had traveled long distances after losing their homes, while others had left towns where they no longer felt safe or welcomed. Despite their hardships, they spoke with quiet courage rather than sadness. One woman, older than the others, seemed to guide the group gently. She spoke calmly, helping everyone stay organized. The rancher noticed how others listened to her without question, but there was something steady about her presence, something that reminded him of leadership built through experience rather than force. As the sun climbed higher, the ranch felt alive. Laughter echoed across the yard when someone shared a joke. The rancher found himself pausing more often, listening instead of rushing through work. He had forgotten how laughter could change the atmosphere of a place. At lunchtime, they invited him to eat with them. At first, he stood awkwardly, unsure where to sit or what to say. He was not used to being part of a group anymore. Still, he accepted and joined them near the fire. The meal was simple but warm, and conversation flowed easily among the widows. They asked about the ranch, about how long he had lived there, and about the land itself. He answered briefly at first, But slowly his responses became longer. Without realizing it, he began sharing small stories about the past. How he and his wife had built parts of the ranch together, how certain trees were planted during a special season, and how storms had once nearly destroyed the barn before they rebuilt it stronger. Speaking about those memories felt strange but also comforting.
Instead of pain, he felt pride in what had been created.
Days passed, and the widows remained while repairing their wagon and planning their next steps. Some helped plant vegetables in an unused patch of land. Others cleaned areas that had been neglected during his years of solitude. The rancher felt both grateful and uneasy. He had grown used to doing everything alone, and sharing responsibility felt like losing control, even if the results were good. One evening, a sudden storm rolled across the fields. Strong wind pushed against the house, and rain fell heavily.
The women worked together quickly, securing tools and covering supplies.
The rancher watched them move with calm determination. Their teamwork reminded him that survival often depended on community. After the storm passed, they gathered inside the house to stay warm. The room that had once felt empty now held conversation and quiet storytelling. Someone began singing softly, and others joined in. The rancher sat near the fire, listening. He realized he had not heard music inside his home since his wife was alive. The moment stirred emotions he had long avoided. He stepped outside for air, unsure how to handle the memories. One of the widows followed gently, asking if he was all right. He admitted that he was simply not used to having people around. She listened without judgment and told him that change often felt uncomfortable at first. Her words stayed with him long after she returned inside. The next morning he woke earlier than usual, feeling restless but also curious. He walked through the ranch, noticing improvements everywhere, tools organized, fences repaired, and fresh footprints in the dirt. The place felt cared for again, not just maintained. He began to wonder what would happen when they eventually left. The thought surprised him. Only days earlier he had wanted them gone quickly. Now he felt unsure about returning to complete silence. As the widows continued their work, they shared stories of their future hopes. Some dreamed of starting small businesses, while others simply wanted a peaceful home. Listening to them made the rancher think about his own future for the first time in years. He had lived only day by day, avoiding long-term plans. One afternoon, while riding across the fields, he realized that helping them gave him a sense of purpose he had been missing. He had always believed strength meant standing alone. Now he began to see that strength could also come from standing beside others. In the evening, they sat together watching the sunset. The sky turned orange and gold, casting long shadows across the land. Conversation slowed into comfortable silence. The rancher felt something shift inside him, a small opening where hope began to grow. He did not know how long they would stay or what changes would come next, but he knew one thing clearly. The ranch was no longer only a place of memories. It was becoming a place of new beginnings. Life on the ranch had begun to settle into a new rhythm. The rancher still woke before sunrise, but now he often heard quiet movement outside before he even stepped onto the porch. Someone might already be feeding the animals, while another prepared breakfast near the fire. The once empty land felt alive with purpose. And though he did not say it often, he appreciated the change more each day. However, not everyone outside the ranch welcomed this new situation. News traveled quickly in small towns, and it did not take long before people began talking about the group of widows staying on his land. Some spoke kindly, believing he was simply helping travelers. Others were more suspicious, wondering why so many strangers had settled there for longer than expected.
One afternoon, the rancher rode into town to collect supplies. He noticed the change immediately.
Conversations paused when he entered the general store. A few people greeted him politely, but others watched quietly, their expressions filled with questions. The store owner eventually asked him directly about the women, speaking carefully but clearly. He explained that they were only staying temporarily while repairing their wagon and planning their future. The owner nodded, but the rancher sensed doubt behind the polite smile. On his ride back, he thought about the town's reaction. For years, people had left him alone because he kept to himself. Now, his decision to help others had placed him under attention he was not used to.
He wondered if he had invited trouble without realizing it.
When he returned, the widows greeted him warmly, unaware of the tension growing outside the ranch. They showed him the progress they had made. New vegetable rows planted, tools repaired, and parts of the barn strengthened. Their dedication made him feel proud but also protective. He did not want outside opinions to disturb the peaceful atmosphere they had created. That evening, he shared what he had heard in town. The women listened carefully, some exchanging worried looks. They had faced judgment before during their journey and understood how quickly rumors could spread. Still, they refused to let fear control their choices. One woman spoke calmly, reminding everyone that they had survived worse challenges together. The rancher admired their courage. He realized that their strength was not loud or forceful. It was steady and patient. Days later, 2 men from the town arrived unexpectedly. They approached respectfully but asked many questions about how long the widows planned to stay. Their tone was polite but firm, suggesting concern about strangers settling nearby. The rancher answered calmly, explaining that the land was his and that the women had permission to remain while they needed.
After the visitors left, he felt a mix of frustration and determination.
For years, no one had interfered with his life. Now he had to defend a decision that felt right to him. The widows noticed his mood and offered quiet support, reminding him that standing for others sometimes required courage. As time passed, the widows began sharing more of their personal stories with him. Breaths. One had lost her home to financial hardship. Another had spent years traveling without finding a place where she felt safe. Listening to them helped him understand the depth of their resilience. They were not simply searching for shelter. They were searching for belonging. Meanwhile, the ranch itself continued to change. New structures were built with teamwork, and areas that had once been unused began to flourish. The rancher felt a renewed sense of purpose as he worked alongside them. Instead of carrying every responsibility alone, he now shared tasks and ideas with others. One afternoon, a strong windstorm approached, suddenly threatening the crops they had planted together. Everyone worked quickly, securing fences and protecting supplies. The storm tested their cooperation, but they managed to protect most of what they had built.
Afterward, they gathered together, tired but proud of what they had accomplished. The experience strengthened their bond.
The rancher realized that working as a group made challenges feel lighter. He also noticed how easily laughter returned after difficult moments, something he had rarely allowed himself before. Despite these positive changes, tension from outside continued to grow quietly. Some neighbors remained supportive, while others questioned whether the widows might stay permanently. The rancher began thinking more seriously about the future. He wondered if offering temporary shelter might eventually become something deeper, a shared life that he had not planned. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, the older widow who guided the group spoke privately with him. She thanked him for his kindness and admitted that the ranch had begun to feel like home to many of them. Her honesty surprised him. He had assumed they would leave once their wagon was ready. Hearing that they felt connected to the land made him realize how much had changed since their arrival. He spent that night thinking deeply. The ranch had once been a place of silence and memories. Now it was filled with voices, shared effort, and growing hope. desk. He felt torn between protecting the life he had built alone and embracing the new path forming in front of him. The next morning he rode across the fields at sunrise, watching lights spread over the land. He understood that change was no longer something happening around him. It was happening inside him as well. Helping the widows had reopened parts of his heart he thought were closed forever. As he returned to the house, he saw them working together, laughing as they prepared breakfast. The sight filled him with a quiet sense of belonging. For the first time, he began to consider a future where he would not return to loneliness, a future shaped by shared strength and unexpected companionship. The ranch had changed so much that even the rancher sometimes felt like he was living in a new place. Where there had once been quiet dust and slow movement, there was now steady activity from morning until evening. The widows worked together with natural teamwork, and their presence brought a sense of warmth that slowly reached every corner of the land. Still, inside him, a quiet struggle continued. He often walked alone in the early morning, thinking about his past and wondering if he was ready for the future that seemed to be forming around him. He had lived many years protecting his memories and avoiding deep connections. Now, without planning it, he found himself surrounded by people who cared about the ranch as much as he did. One day, while repairing a fence together, one of the women asked him why he had chosen to live alone for so long. The question was gentle, not demanding, but it stayed with him. He answered honestly, saying that after losing his wife, he believed solitude was easier than facing change. The woman listened quietly and told him that sometimes people build walls not to stay safe, but because they are afraid to hope again. Her words stayed in his mind long after the conversation ended. Meanwhile, outside pressure continued to grow. Some people from town remained unsure about the widows staying at the ranch. A few visitors arrived with polite questions that felt more like warnings. They asked whether the group planned to settle permanently, and whether the rancher understood the responsibility of hosting so many people. He answered calmly each time, but the visits left him thoughtful. He knew that change often created uncertainty for others, especially in a close community. Still, he believed the widows deserved a chance to build something stable after everything they had faced. Despite the tension, the ranch itself continued to improve. The widows introduced new ideas, suggesting ways to organize work more efficiently and expand small projects. Together they repaired an old storage building and turned it into a shared workspace. The rancher watched with quiet admiration as they brought creativity and energy into tasks he had once completed alone. One evening they gathered near the fire to celebrate finishing a long week of work. Someone prepared a simple meal, and another shared a story from her past that made everyone laugh. The rancher found himself laughing too, surprised by how natural it felt. For years, he had avoided moments like this because he feared they would remind him of what he had lost. Now, he realized they were helping him move forward instead. As the weeks passed, he began trusting the widows not only as guests but as partners in shaping the future of the ranch. He invited them to share ideas about planting schedules, animal care, and improvements to the land. Their enthusiasm made him feel less alone in his responsibilities. One morning, a challenge arrived that tested their growing unity. A strong drought threatened the fields, forcing everyone to work harder to protect their crops and animals. The situation required careful planning and cooperation. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, the rancher noticed how naturally the group supported one another. They shared tasks without complaint and encouraged each other during difficult moments. Working side by side during the drought created deeper bonds between them. The rancher realized that facing challenges together built stronger connections than easy days ever could. He also felt proud of how the widows adapted quickly, using their skills and experience to find solutions. During a quiet evening after a long day, he sat alone near the barn, thinking about his late wife. For the first time, the memory brought more peace than sadness. He understood that loving the past did not mean refusing the present. he could honor what he had shared with her while still allowing new relationships and experiences to grow. The older widow who guided the group joined him outside and spoke gently about change. She told him that grief never truly disappears, but can transform into something that gives strength rather than pain. He listened carefully, feeling understood without needing to explain everything.
Later that week, a meeting in town invited him to discuss concerns about the widows staying longer.
He attended, expecting tension, but instead found a mixture of opinions. Some neighbors expressed worry about sudden change, while others spoke positively about the improvements they had seen at the ranch. The rancher spoke honestly, explaining how the widows had worked hard and respected the land. His calm confidence surprised even himself. Years earlier, he would have avoided such conversations. Now he stood firmly, not out of stubbornness, but out of belief in the community they were building. When he returned to the ranch, the widows greeted him with quiet curiosity. He shared what had happened, and together they discussed the future openly. The first time the possibility of them staying permanently became a real conversation rather than an unspoken thought. That night he walked through the ranch slowly, noticing every change. New gardens growing, repaired buildings standing strong, and light shining from windows that had once been dark. He realized the ranch was no longer only a place tied to memory. It had become a living symbol of resilience and shared effort. As the sun set, he stood watching the horizon, feeling both calm and hopeful.
The path ahead remained uncertain, but he no longer feared uncertainty the way he once had. Instead, he felt ready to move forward, trusting the connections that had formed naturally.
The widows were no longer simply travelers passing through. They had become part of the story of the ranch, just as the ranch had become part of their journey. The ranch felt different as another season began. The air carried a sense of calm strength, as if the land itself had accepted the changes that had taken place. What started as a temporary stay had slowly turned into something deeper and more meaningful. The widows were no longer guests who needed permission to stay. They had become part of the daily life of the ranch, sharing responsibilities, ideas, and hopes for the future. The rancher noticed these changes in small moments. Someone would already be preparing tools before he stepped outside in the morning. Another would be checking on the animals while humming softly. The kitchen that once felt empty now carried the warm smell of cooking and quiet conversation. Every corner of the house and land held signs of life. Despite the positive changes, he knew a final decision needed to be made. The widows had repaired their wagon long ago, and nothing stopped them from continuing their journey. Yet none of them spoke about leaving anymore. Instead, they spoke about planting for the next season, repairing more buildings, and building something lasting together. One evening, they gathered near the fire as the sun lowered behind the hills. The sky turned deep gold, and the land glowed softly. The older widow who often guided the group spoke gently about the future. She thanked the rancher for his kindness and admitted that the ranch had become a place of belonging for many of them. Her words were honest and respectful, not demanding. The rancher listened quietly.
He felt the weight of the moment, but also a surprising sense of peace.
For years, he had believed his life would remain unchanged, shaped only by memories of the past. Now he understood that change had come slowly, not as a storm, but as a steady breeze that reshaped everything without force. He stood and looked around at the faces near the fire. Each person had brought strength and compassion into his life. He realized that helping them had not taken anything away from him. Instead, it had given him purpose again. With calm certainty, he told them they were welcome to stay, not just for a short time, but as long as they wished to build a future there. The words felt natural when he spoke them, as if they had been waiting inside him for a long time. The group responded with quiet smiles, rather than loud celebration. They understood the importance of the moment and respected the sincerity behind his decision. That night, the fire burned brighter, and conversation flowed easily. The rancher felt something he had not felt in years, a sense of belonging that came from shared trust. Over the following weeks, the ranch transformed further. New plans were made for expanding gardens and improving the barn. Tasks were divided naturally, and everyone contributed according to their strengths. The rancher noticed how easily cooperation replaced loneliness. Even during difficult days, he felt supported rather than overwhelmed. The town slowly began to change its attitude as well. Some neighbors visited and saw the progress made through teamwork. They noticed how the land looked healthier and how the people living there showed respect for the community.
Over time, suspicion softened into acceptance.
One morning, while walking along the fields, the rancher reflected on how much had changed since the day the caravan first appeared. Back then, he had been unsure whether allowing strangers onto his land was a mistake. Now he understood that it had been the beginning of a new chapter. He paused near a tree that he and his wife had planted years ago. The memory came gently, without pain.
He realized that welcoming new people into his life did not erase what he had shared with her.
Instead, it honored the kindness and openness she had always shown to others. That understanding brought him deep peace. The widows also continued to grow individually. Some began small projects that connected with the nearby town, sharing goods and skills. Others found joy in simple routines like caring for animals or tending gardens. Each person found a role that gave meaning to their days. Evenings became special moments when everyone gathered to talk, share stories, or simply watch the sky change colors. The rancher often sat quietly, listening and smiling. Despair. He no longer felt like an observer watching life from a distance. He felt like part of something alive and meaningful. As another sunset painted the horizon, he stood near the porch, looking across the land. The once silent ranch now carried laughter, footsteps, and shared dreams. The loneliness that once defined his life had slowly faded, replaced by connection and hope. He understood that healing did not happen in one moment. It came through small steps, through opening doors when fear said to keep them closed. The widows had arrived searching for shelter, but together they had created something much greater, a community built on resilience and compassion. In the quiet of the evening, he felt grateful for the unexpected path that had brought them together. The future still held unknown challenges, but he no longer faced them alone. The ranch stood as proof that even after loss, new beginnings could grow when people chose to trust and support one another.